Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me to discuss what you need to know regarding the Trump and Biden tax plans as we approach the election is Jeffrey Weiner, chairman and CEO of Marcum, the largest public accounting and advisory services firm in the United States. Jeffrey, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Thanks for having me, Jill.
And before we get into policy and the election, what are your thoughts around the economy in general and the consumer?
Well, I think the economy is in trouble at the moment. You know, the coronavirus pandemic has had a devastating effect on the retail landscaping. It's also had a devastating effect on food and beverage, travel, leisure, entertainment. So there are some parts of the economy that are doing really poorly. It's estimated that the travel, leisure, food and beverage, entertainment portion of the economy is somewhere between 10 and 12%. And that still is dragging with no signs of a sustainable recovery until the pandemic is under control or there's a vaccine or a therapeutic. But people by and large are shying away from mass gatherings, indoor places, restaurants, hotels, meeting spaces, airplanes, sporting venues. So until the pandemic is over, whatever that means, there's 10 to 12% of the economy that's just not going to be there.
See, and what also concerns me, Jeffrey, companies largely got a pass in 2020 as they were looking to preserve jobs and focus on business continuity. What happens in 2021 when management teams look to right-size the business, control some costs, of which employees are a big contributor to that, and look to return to profitability? Isn't that only going to add to the unemployment scenario that we're dealing with right now, assuming that we don't have, a 100% COVID-19 plan in place?
Oh, certainly. And I think we haven't seen the end of it. I mean, every day I read the paper and I read about another company that's doing permanent layoffs or furloughs. And as this pandemic stays around longer, it's having a more debilitating effect. You're going to start to, we see retail bankruptcies every week and retail closures every week. Places like Walmart and Amazon are doing well. The companies that had a good online presence supported by bricks and mortar. But for the most part, the traditional brick and mortar retailers are still in deep trouble. And I think, the upcoming Christmas season is going to be a great indicator or a bad indicator, because I don't think people are going to be flocking to shopping malls and stores. Most of that is going to be done online. So Amazon, Walmart, the retailers with the good web presences, FedEx, Amazon, people who thrive on people buying online, box manufacturers who make all those boxes we've been getting on our front doors every day. But there's that whole retail segment that Christmas is just going to exacerbate, because retail sales at retail in stores, I predict, is going to be down at least double digits and possibly into the 20 to 30% range.
Right. Well, of course, too, it's also a shift in consumer behavior. I mean, we've learned that we can live without going to brick and mortar, unless, of course, you want that experience. But it's just a seismic shift in consumer. So what have you learned at Marcum in regards to how companies are approaching work from home and hybrid workforces? Is it being embraced? How are they reevaluating compensation structure and facilities?
Well, all of those, we have no choice but to embrace it. I mean, COVID accelerated a trend that was already happening. I know I personally worked from home before when it made sense. But when I was working from home, I didn't have my wife or my children in the next room. So it was a different kind of experience. But what companies are learning, and there are really big companies that overnight turn to virtual work environment and people working from home. What people are doing is looking at the tasks, as I call them, that can be done remotely. In every company, there are certain jobs that are conducive to remote workforce, where it's a repetitive task that you can do through technology. But there's also other that are more client-facing, that are more business development oriented. A receptionist in an office can't do that remotely. It's not the same thing. The person delivering the mail, and we still have people delivering mail, can't do that remotely. But there are task-oriented jobs that are very conducive to working remotely, if that's what you want to do, and you don't really want to advance in a company, you just want the same job for a long period of time, well, maybe you can do that remotely. I think people are reevaluating how they pay people, because if you're in a task-oriented job, rather than get a salary for coming into an office 8 hours a day, your compensation model may evolve to what I'll call a piecework type of environment, where we're going to give you this amount of work and we'll pay you a certain amount of money for it. If you do more than what we're giving you, we'll pay you extra. If we do less, companies also have different busy seasons. So people who work remotely may not have a traditional 9 to 5 job, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. Companies may tailor work from home to their natural busy cycle, and have more people working when they're busy and scale down when they're not. So a lot of planning goes into this, but I will tell you, work from home is here to stay. How people manage it, and even people who go in may decide, like, why do I need to commute on Mondays and Fridays? Maybe all my in-person meetings will be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I think coronavirus and the pandemic and the shutdown really accelerated the trend. And but as the pendulum swings, it swings, it always swings too far and then comes back and finds a balance. So I think we have to get back to whatever the new normal is going to be before we figure out where this is all going to settle.
All right, let's talk about tax policy. Do you think the economic effect of the pandemic has been more of a decision driver than tax policy for the election? I mean, in order to have significant tax policy changes, the House, Senate, and President all have to agree, and they haven't been able to get to agree on much, regardless of the pandemic.
Yeah, I would put tax policy way down there and what people are focusing on right now. Tax policy has a dubious effect on the economy. When tax policy changes, there's always a bump, either good or bad initially, and then things settle. But I think in this particular election, tax policy is probably not in the top 5 people are looking at. There's, as they change tax policy, there's always winners and losers. I'm not sure any change in tax policy is something that is going to swing an election.
Yeah, and I was, reading in the notes, there's a couple of areas that Marcum clients are most concerned about. I mean, let's look at New York and New Jersey, for example. We're certainly seeing, the flight out of the cities. We don't really get write-offs anymore due to those assault restrictions and so forth. I would imagine, those there's a couple of areas of concern that Marcum clients.
Oh, absolutely. I think the state and city government should be more concerned than the clients. The clients have options.
Right.
New Jersey just enacted a millionaire's tax, and I'm going to write a column about the tax the rich movement next week. But I've read statistics that 2% of the taxpayers in some states fund 40% of the budget. So you now add a couple of percentage points of tax that may force some people to relocate. There's a lot of states, whether it's Texas, whether it's Wyoming, whether it's Florida, whether it's Tennessee, that are no tax states. And, it's not just the taxes that we pay. People don't mind paying if they think they're getting value. But in a lot of these states, people can't perceive the value, and the tax the rich is not the way to go, because not only do they pay taxes, but what I call the trickle-down effect from wealthy people living in a state. Not only they pay taxes, they spend a lot of money in that state, which creates sales tax revenue. They have help. They have drivers, they have nannies, they have housekeepers. They're always remodeling their houses. They're buying stuff. The trickle-down effect to the economy, to getting one of these high net worth billionaires leaving a state, is phenomenal. And I don't think, you can push people so far, and at some point it just gets too expensive. But if you live in some place like California, where there's a 13% tax rate, or you live in New York City, where between federal and state taxes, you're at 11 or 12%, and you add that to the federal taxes you're paying, you could be paying more than half your money in federal, state, and local taxes. And at some point, people look and say, why am I working from January 1st to sometime in July just to pay taxes?
Right. Yep, that's a really great point, Jeffrey. Thanks so much for all the insight and for joining us on Trade Talks.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.